Hi, welcome to my comprehensive tutorial of Create the Factory Must Grow, specifically the 1.0 update. So as of right now, I guess as of always, TFMG is a pretty buggy and unstable mod. Playing with some blocks like the engines or some of the electrical components might not work as intended, and in some cases, can even crash your game or completely corrupt your world. If you plan on using this mod on a save that you care about, I recommend playing on version 1.20.1 and being a little bit cautious about using these, what I'm going to call the modular engines. I'm going to structure this tutorial for someone playing on survival. If you're in creative, you obviously don't have to care about the resource progression. You can just place whatever you want. I won't be going through the crafting recipes for all of the individual machines. You're probably already playing with JEI or something similar, and if you're not, you really should be, because it's very helpful. I also assume that you're already familiar with how to create things using the Create mod. This is the video version of the quest line that I made for TFMG. It starts at cast iron, goes through oil, everything that you can make in the vat, the modular engines and the large engines, electricity, some more electricity stuff, as well as all of the many aesthetic components that you can use to spruce up your factory. In the beginning, all you can make is cast iron in this basin with a mechanical press. Heat it up and make sure you filter the recipe in the basin, otherwise you'll just get a ton of trapdoors. Once you have cast iron, you can create the coke oven. Here I have multiple coke ovens. Just build them up as so. You give them coal. Here I already have a setup that distributes coal. It's good to have multiple of them because they take a little while to process. But here you can see the creosote coming in, and eventually these front doors will open up and drop some coal coke on here, which isn't too useful on its own except as fuel. So you're better off just immediately crushing it and turning it into coal coke dust. Now, if you're already accustomed to previous versions of TFMG, the blast furnace is a little bit different from those versions. It now requires something called hot air to work, which you make in this new blast stove. And you just take two of them, stack them on each other like that, and you've got a blast stove. You can also make larger versions of the blast stove, but these don't actually do anything better than the smallest possible version, so I say just stick with that. The blast stove takes in creosote and air to make the hot air which you need for the blast furnace. It also makes carbon dioxide, which you need to get rid of somehow. You can collect air using air intakes. Pro tip, they use 0 stress units. As you can see, I'm powering them at full speed using a minimum size windmill. Ramp them up as fast as you want, and then they'll just collect air faster for free. Now, pay attention to the piping because this is really important. The fuel, which can be creosote or something else called furnace gas, which I'll get to later, is pumped in through the bottom face, like how I have here. Air gets pumped in through one of the sides. Your hot air product comes out of the very top, like this, and the carbon dioxide can be pumped out of the side. Now, once these two input tanks have enough fluid in them, it'll start working. So I will connect that up right now. These are going to fill in, and then once they're full enough, it starts working, and you can see hot air is coming out into this blast furnace hatch. Get my ingredients, and of course, just like previously, they can be dropped in through the top, and it will start making molten steel and slag. What's also new in this update are changes to the casting. So now you have these casting basins which only accept enough molten steel to create one ingot. So no dealing with, oh, it takes 999 millibuckets when it stores 1,000, and no, none of that wastage. It's an exacting amount, which is good. Now, I mentioned about something called furnace gas. which you can also use to power the blast stove. This comes right out of the blast furnace, so you can collect it with putting a hatch up here. And don't worry about dropping stuff in, because if you funnel things into the hatch, they'll drop into the blast furnace no problem. So this furnace gas gets collected and you can pipe it into the blast stove. I recommend storing a little bit of this for when you stop blasting and you want to start up again later, so you don't have to kickstart it with creosote. Blast furnaces can basically be built to any height. The taller you make them, the faster they work. You also now have the option to add this steel reinforcement to the outside. And if you come down here, it'll say reinforced, and this will make it go even faster. Just make sure your casting can keep up. You can also go for a rusted aesthetic if you really want. Finding oil deposits is a little different now than in previous versions, as well as a bit harder. This new scanner has to be placed on top of a machine input to work. In my experience, oil deposits don't seem to be as common as they used to be, and that's reflected in how the new scanner works. So all of these little tubes, which are part of the crafting recipe, these represent the 25 chunks around you, and you can see one of them in each is lit up. The chunk border is right here. So this one says there's an oil deposit in the chunk that way. This one says there's an oil deposit in this chunk. In my case, on this island, there weren't actually any naturally generating oil deposits, so I had to dig down and make my own. The downside of this, and the reason why this is a little bit harder to find oil than in previous versions, it doesn't really tell you exactly where the oil is. It just says it's in this chunk, you have to go find it. You can also be unlucky in the sense that, like, you might find an oil deposit underground, but there's a piece of bedrock covering it, so you can't bring your industrial pipe all the way to the surface to pump it out, which is really annoying. I sure hope that none of you out there ever run across this, but statistically you probably will. So once you've found a deposit, things pretty much work the same as previous versions. You bring your industrial pipe up, you put this base on there, all of your other components, machine input, pump jack hammers and such. Make sure, this is a reminder to everyone, make sure that you super glue the pump jack. You super glue it, you put your pump jack crank, and now it functions as a pump jack and it'll start pumping crude oil. Oh, and these blocks are just a different variant of the pump jack. Because it's a create contraption, you can super glue other things to there, as long as the base pump jack arm is there. Like, if you don't break this up. You can also make it any size that you want. The faster the machine input shaft spins, the quicker it digs up oil. I find that it only scales extraction properly if the crank is rotating in a certain direction. I'm not quite sure exactly what that direction is. In this case, it seems to work if it's spinning towards the head. Other cases I've seen it only works if it's spinning away from it. But in any case, running it at max speed is pretty cheap. You only need 2 large water wheels for it. By default, oil deposits have a finite amount of oil, which you can check by right-clicking on the deposit with an oil hammer. However, if you don't like to face the harsh reality that fossil fuels are a limited, non-renewable resource and that someday we will run out of it, you can change it to infinite in the config. Just like previous versions of the mod, distillation towers are made from steel tanks, the distillation controller, these outputs, and industrial pipe. You're pretty flexible in how big they can be. Really, this only benefits the amount of heating you can put under it, so just for demonstration, here is a max size distillation tower with as many blaze burners as I could fit under it. Different numbers of outputs will give you different varieties of results. So the smallest one is 3 outputs and you get gasoline, diesel, and heavy oil. Adding 2 more outputs adds kerosene and LPG, and adding 1 more output gives you naphtha. Yes, that's how it's pronounced.
Naphtha.
What's new in this mod is you can actually refine heavy oil again. So if you do that, that is how you make lubrication oil now. And in these recipes, you actually get half of the heavy oil back, so you can just keep recycling it until I guess it's all gone. It's a little bit more limited what you get because, well, you're not getting some of the lighter products from the heavy oil. So you can get diesel, kerosene, and
Naphtha
out of it alongside the lubrication oil. You can get more out of the crude oil you took out of the ground, plus a crafting ingredient, and there are other uses for lubrication oil now. New to this version are chemical vats. There are 3 different chemical vats: cast iron, steel, and fireproof. The fireproof ones are like end game, you need like circuit boards and a whole bunch of complex stuff, which I'm not going to look at for now. So these chemical vats, a lot like tanks, they can be made into different sizes. What you can do with these vats is you can either have them sitting alone, you can have them heated, or you can have this industrial mixer or electrode holders on top, and I'll explain what they do. So for mixing, you just right click the industrial mixer with a mixer blade, spit it up, and now you can do anything which involves mixing, which could include this sulfuric acid, plastic, all sorts. Do keep in mind that some recipes require higher tiers of vat, so not everything involving mixing can be done in a cast iron vat. Some of it needs to be in a steel vat and might also require heating as well. And with the goggles, you can see like if something is heated. There's also this centrifuge, which is really only used for centrifuging air into neon gas. The electrolysis machine, the electrolyzer. To make an electrolyzer, you put 2 electrode holders on top of the vat and right click them with either a zinc or copper electrode. They don't have to be different. They can be the same, or they could be different. It doesn't really matter. They function the same. So this is the arc furnace as an upgrade from the blast furnace. Kind of rings a bell with immersive engineering, but yeah, this is the end game way to get steel. I'll come back to this later. Now, electricity. Arguably the most difficult and unintuitive, confusing element in this mod. It's a very simplified version of how electricity really works, but it's still pretty daunting. You know, stay tuned and I'll break it down so that you can make sure your entire factory doesn't go dark. So before you even begin to craft this generator, you need to get something called magnets. As you can see, you deploy them onto this as like a recipe sequence. JEI doesn't really tell you about how to first get magnets. It only says use this polarizer, which requires magnets to craft. So that's left a lot of people confused. And there is this lightning rod sitting up here, but that doesn't say what to do with it. I'm going to tell you what to do with it. So you take your magnetic alloy, toss it on top of the lightning rod, and wait for lightning to strike. Wow, that was fast. I thought I'd be waiting here for like a minute. It didn't turn all of the magnetic alloy into magnets. So I put a stack on there. It only gave me like 34 back. So it's a little bit messy. That's why you might want to craft this polarizer later on. Next important thing is the winding machine. It takes in spools of wire, and you can specify what percentage out of 1,000 will be wound onto this specified item. So I can say, oh, just wind 10% onto this electromagnetic coil. I right click it and it starts doing it. So this is for making transformer coils, which I'll get to later. Any crafting recipe involving winding, like the generator, So you can see one step is to put 75 turns onto your unfinished assembly. It doesn't matter what the percentage is, it'll always wind the exact amount, so don't worry about that. The only way to get items out, other than the spool, is with a funnel here, or a chute. Keep in mind it'll extract unfinished items as well. You'll want to sort of control when it outputs items. For a manual setup like I have here, a funnel and lever work just fine. So now you should have everything you need to craft a generator and make some power. A multimeter is an absolutely essential tool for working with electricity, both in real life and in game. The item only works if you don't have your goggles on, so make sure you take them off. But now when you hover over an electrical component, it will show you 4 values. So let me hover over this light bulb here. So you have resistance, R, of the component, which is measured in ohms. This is a fixed value that the component has. So light bulbs always have 100 ohms of resistance. You have voltage, U, going into the component, and that's measured in volts. You can decrease or increase the voltage of the entire circuit using potentiometers and transformers. You have current, I, going to the component, measured in amps. The value there is 350 milliamps, so less than 1 amp. This increases as you increase the voltage, so you can indirectly control this value. Some components, like the electrode holder, have a minimum current requirement in order to work. And lastly, you have power. Power consumed by the component is measured in watts. The more current that's going through the component, the higher this will be. This value is what dictates how many generators you're going to need to power your base. And when you shift, you can get network power consumption and network power generation. So this creative generator is generating 1,400 watts or 1.4 kilowatts. And all of these light bulbs together are consuming 48 watts. Because they're all attached together, the voltage is split among the 4 light bulbs, so each of them gets a voltage of 35 volts instead of the 140 volts that I'm supplying. You can use diodes, potentiometers, or transformers to split the circuit into different parts, and each of these different parts will basically receive full voltage. Here I'm again providing 140 volts, and this diode ensures that this light bulb also gets that full voltage, 140 volts. 140 volts. This potentiometer is set to 100%, so 140 volts. This transformer has 2 coils with the same number of turns, so that's a 1-to-1 ratio, 140 volts, which means these bulbs are brighter than these bulbs. I don't know how well that comes across on video. Of course, if you give everything full voltage, that means your network will consume more power. So this is consuming 784 watts instead of the 48 watts of the previous one. So coming back to the potentiometer, you can configure it to let a percentage of the voltage through. So right now I have it set to 100%. It's basically acting as a diode. But if I set it to, let's say 50%, only 70 volts is going to come to this light bulb. This is useful if your factory's electrical system is high voltage and you don't want to be sending thousands of watts through each of your light bulbs just to have them shine as brightly as if they were on 150 volts. So that's what this is useful for. Also, these no longer blow up if you overvolt them, which is good. The main thing you use electricity for in terms of resources is to craft aluminum ingots. You need a steel vat, at least 2x2x2, with these electrodes. Could be zinc, could be copper, could be both. Each of these electrode holders has a minimum of 5 amps in order to operate, meaning you have to provide them with at least 500 volts. See, I'm supplying them with 510, there's 5 amps through them, and it's not giving me any warnings. If I decrease the speed of this generator, the voltage it produces decreases, and now it's going to give me a warning, not enough current, and it'll tell me how much it needs. So I have them sharing a circuit like those light bulbs over there. So I have to boost this voltage to over 1,000 volts. Since this generator can only produce 255 volts, I'm going to need a transformer in order to boost that voltage. These transformers can raise or lower the voltage based on the ratio of wire turns on each of their coils. So I can take the coils out. One of them is 100, the other one is 400. Input goes first, output goes in second. It doesn't matter on which part you click, it'll always put the input in first. Coming back to the winding machine, this is where that percentage setting comes in. You can dial the amount of turns on each of these coils. So for this 100 one, I set it to 10. For the 400, I set it to 40 because that's 40% of 1,000. So right now in this update, the transformer doesn't have a great way to tell the input from the output. The only thing you can really use is this grainy noise texture on the top. So just for your reference, this checkerboard square on this side is the input, and this straight line here is the output. Remember that, and hope that the texture gets updated to make this a little bit more obvious. In this setup, this transformer has a turn ratio of 4 because I have the 100 coil and I have the 400 coil. The rest of the multimeter data here actually shows information about the circuit passed here. This component itself does not consume any power. Neither do the diodes or potentiometer. Just filter in some bauxite. Let me bring this thing's status to heated, and it should make some aluminum and gradually output it. Oh, and of course, it makes carbon dioxide, so you're going to have to pump that out. Now, moving on, the electric motor is pretty bugged right now. It sometimes works, but it'll sometimes stop working, or it'll break itself whenever it pleases. But in theory, if you give it power, you can adjust how much RPM it makes, kind of like the Crate Edition's electric motor. You can change the speed. Now, once you have aluminum, you can craft this large generator, which is made from a rotor and 8 stators. So you put the stators around, rotor in the middle, it makes this multi-block. The advantage over the small generator is that it makes a higher maximum voltage and of course more power. There are other miscellaneous components, different lights for aesthetics, a redstone controlled switch, a voltage detector, a traffic light, and a segmented display, all of various usefulness. As some bit of bonus functionality, you can turn off lights by supplying them with redstone power. Now looping back to the arc furnace, I've used diodes to reduce the amount of voltage I need to boost. So the input is 255 volts. No, stacking generators does not increase the voltage. You are stuck at 255, and in order to put 5 amps through these electrode holders, and you need 3 of them, they can be arranged however you want. You might notice that the resistance of this electrode holder is higher than this one, and that's because it's using a different kind of electrode. It's using a graphite electrode, and I made sure the turn ratio is exactly enough to boost it up to precisely that voltage. So what I did here is I have a coil with 1,000 turns on the output and 170 turns on the input, and that is the exact ratio needed to satisfy the 5 amps requirement. Just like the blast furnace, it takes in crushed iron ore, lime sand, and coal coke dust. It actually has a reduced chance to consume the coal coke dust. You'll kind of want to meter all of these, which is why I have the threshold switches and chutes here, just to prevent this from clogging itself. They don't split inventory slots, so it can clog itself with its own inputs, which I don't like, and I sure hope it gets fixed, but that's just how it is. Moving on to the engines, I'm going to start with these large engines since they're actually simpler to operate than all of those. These take in fuel and air, which again you get from the air intake, and they output carbon dioxide. So you have the simple large engine, not very hard to make. you just need steel. And then you have the large engine, which you need aluminum for, and it's a lot more expensive. The large engine makes more SU than the simpler one, and both of these engines can run on furnace gas. Yes, there's another use for that furnace gas. Kerosene, naphtha, and diesel. Moving on to the modular engines, you get these engine bases that you put down, and you can extend them out as well. With your goggles on, you can see some information about these engines. So you'll notice that this engine has a type, and I can change that with this schematic. You have I, V, W, U, Boxer, different engine arrangements that you might find in real life. Now, this one has a type as well, but do not click with the schematic. That will break and corrupt and destroy your world. This is bugged. Do not grab all the components. So it wants a crankshaft, steel cogwheel, large steel cogwheel, mechanical belt, 2 steel pipes, and a steel mechanism. And now it'll say, oh, piston's missing. So I'm gonna do the same for this engine. It's just the same parts. And the turbine engine takes a little bit less. Needs a shaft, steel cogwheel, 2 pipes, and 2 steel mechanisms. Now all I need are the pistons and turbines. Turbine blades only support kerosene as a fuel. You need to click 4 times on each turbine block in order to completely fill it with turbine blades. And now it's fully assembled. Before I fill these out with pistons, I'm going to talk about different types of pistons that you can craft. So there's these simple engine cylinders, which can run on creosote or furnace gas. These are dirt cheap. There are these diesel engine cylinders, which require aluminum. These engine cylinders, which can use gasoline, naphtha, or kerosene. And they're made by taking a diesel engine cylinder and a spark plug. And finally, you have the LPG engine cylinder, which takes in LPG, and you craft that by taking the previous engine cylinder and crafting it with a brass pipe. It's not super clear in the JEI what exact cylinders you need, but that's the progression. I'm going to fill these out with this one. Oh, I guess I left this at the I configuration. And so now it's completed. This radial one, I think I messed something up here, but you get the point. The radial engine takes 8 per base block. And here I have all the different configurations of the regular engine. So you have the I, you have the V, W, U, and Boxer. I am supplying them with kerosene, and how you turn them on is you just give them a redstone input. Also very important that I forgot to mention, you need to put an output shaft on the engine in order to get an output from it. This only applies to the regular engine. These come with a shaft. The turbine also comes with a shaft. But for all of them, you need to pipe in the fuel and pipe out carbon dioxide. There are upgrades that you can give to this engine. You can add a turbocharger, you can add an industrial pipe, and you can add this transmission, which is used in conjunction with the engine controller. So the turbo, you slap it on, you can only put 1 on the entire engine, and it just boosts the power of that engine. It's worth mentioning, you can only apply 1 upgrade per these blocks. So I can put the industrial pipe here, and what that does, it'll automatically take fluids from adjacent tanks. So I don't even need a pump in order to fill this up. You still need to pump out the carbon dioxide though. And the last upgrade is this transmission. I would not use the engine controller. Its main use is for manually controlling the engine. So like if I right click on it, I can like press the accelerator. How do I get out of this? Release me. Oh gosh, okay. Yeah, I just don't use the engine controller. And the transmission is sort of the linking object between the engine controller. So if I put that down, It is now linked to this engine controller, and I can put it on the engine. Now it's controlled by this. Each engine configuration has a different efficiency value. So this I engine is using 11.1 millibuckets per second of kerosene. This V configuration is using a little more than double that. This one's using a lot. This is very inefficient, but you get a lot of power in a small space. Yeah, the Boxer and U-type engines have different efficiency values as well. You see 4 pistons on each of these. You get different fuel consumptions and of course different SU outputs. The V configuration actually makes more SU than this other 4-cylinder one. There's some interesting meta balancing that could happen there. But I promised that there would be a use for lubricant. There's also a use for cooling fluid. Beforehand, you could pipe cooling fluid across the previous diesel engine, which the large engine has replaced, and you used to have a diesel engine extension which would marginally increase the power of the diesel engine, and you would pump cooling fluid and lubricant through that. But now you can fill up this oil can and cooling fluid bottle and apply them to any engine. So see, I just gave it some lubricant and it's dropped the fuel consumption to 8 millibuckets per second. I can do it with the cooling fluid as well, and it drops it even further. So if you really want to save fuel, go ahead and use these. They will consume oil and cooling fluid over time. Oh, I've run out. If you want to keep them oiled and cooled, you'll have to manually come back and do up the engines. And it appears you can't do it for the large engines. So heads up with that. You can of course do it for the turbine and possibly the radial engine if I had oil. Yeah. So for all of these modular engines, you can use the oil can and cooling fluid. I'm not too sure if it's worth it because it's a little bit of manual upkeep, but I'm sure some people are into that. So that concludes my comprehensive tutorial on the Factory Must Grow and its mechanics. There are probably some things that I didn't cover, like the thermite grenades and flaming swords and potato cannons and whatever, but I will provide the files for this quest line in the description if you want to use it. I think less people should be confused on how to play with this mod. You know, they're intimidated by the learning curve, and I kind of want to make that easy and have this as some form of documentation, because the Discord is not documentation. It's terrible for documentation. So I'm plugging in my quest line at the end. I will see you in the next couple weeks with another episode of my Jaffa Factory series, but until then, make sure to leave some feedback, show your appreciation. Stay tuned for future uploads. Goodbye.